Tell you what, one of the things that we do on this program, and it very much amplifies, my own mission and purpose around Champion South Africa, is to identify champions, to amplify them, so that you know who they are, and I hope that you'll be inspired by that. That is why the comments we've had so many today from people about champions in their community are just so heartwarming and incredibly inspiring. But let's move on to another person who certainly made his mark in our country, Naeem Jeenah, who's an academic, but specifically in terms of his work, he's the executive director for the Afro Middle East Centre. And Naeem has been, well, he's going to be the guest today in the Champion People feature. So Naeem, good chatting to you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Ashraf.
Goodness, I'm thinking of the many chats we've had on SAFM and then on The Voice. I mean, and that's a station that you were very much a part of all those years ago. Can you quite believe that when you established, you and your late wife, right, established The Voice? Because I mean, that's how far our own connection goes.
Yes, that's when we met, right? That was around 1997, I think. Yes, we went on air 1997 August, and that's when you and I met. You were a sports presenter on The Voice, producer, presenter at The Voice. You did everything, of course.
Things have changed, absolutely, yeah. Well, we come full circle in many ways, right? But let's talk about you and the work that you do. So Afro Middle East Centre, you've certainly been a commentator on issues extensively throughout all different media platforms. But perhaps behind the scenes, what is the title of executive director of the Afro Middle East Centre? What does that person do?
Well, in a sense, I'm a manager of other people who do brilliant work. We have 2 or 3 researchers, events coordinator, administrative staff, etc., and a team that does an excellent piece of work. I mean, many people in our team would work, particularly when we are having events, etc., literally 12, 14, 16 hours a day, and are quite happy to do so. And my job is to congratulate them for doing a good piece of work in the main.
And you do that quite well, I hope, right? Lots of
they keep working 14, 16 hours a day, so I guess yes, I do it quite well.
Well, okay, so that's the public front in terms of what we see. But I mean, the Afro Middle East Centre exists to do what?
Well, it's a research institute, or some might say think tank. It focuses on the Middle East and North Africa region in the main, though our purview kind of extends beyond that in both directions. So in the African context, we deal with other contexts also. Most recently, we've done work on northern Mozambique, for example. And on the other side, on the Middle East side, there's also expansive, and we do some work around Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc. So it's mainly research-based, and our products are our publications. So we publish between 3 and 5 books a year, a number of other analysis pieces that we send out on our mailing list, etc. And we have a number of events, 2 international conferences a year, seminars, workshops, training courses, etc.
And I mean, how do you know you're making? Because surely we all want to make an impact. I mean, if you were selling whatever Kusistas today, we're getting to the end of Ramadan. You want people to buy your Kusistas. How do you know that what the center does is making the type of impact? Because yours is abstract. It's not selling goods, right?
Well, I don't know. Intellectual work is something like making Kusistas, I suppose. Look, I mean, a few things. One is that we meet our targets in terms of the targets we set in terms of our products, the events, the publications, etc. Secondly, it's the attention that we get from the media. So, as a research institute, we don't put out media releases, for example, but we get media calling us for comment because they believe that we have something important to say, or they believe that we know what we're talking about on particular issues. And if something big happens, it's not unusual, for example, that in a 24-hour period, we could be doing between 3-4 staff at the office, we could be doing 10-15 interviews. in a 24-hour period. And then, of course, that we also get called on by others for our expertise. So whether it's government departments, we've done briefings for the SANDF Special Forces, for DIRCO, Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, the Intelligence Academy, etc. All of these are unsolicited. People come to us and say, well, basically, we think you have something to say that we'd like to listen to. That is our measure of whether we're useful or not.
And I mean, in the greater scheme of things, the type of research the agency does, or the center does, right, in terms of understanding the various, socio-political issues of many of the countries that falls within your Afro Middle East region that you talk about, right? I mean, that is critically important, I would think, isn't it, for civil society, for government to fully understand. I mean, in the absence of that, I mean, you made the point about Mozambique. How do we know what's going on?
No, absolutely. I mean, look, additionally, in the South African context, AMEC is the only institute in the country that focuses particularly on the Middle East and North Africa. Most of the other international relations institutes or think tanks mostly focus on the African continent in general. Some focus on China, a few other places. So we have, in a sense, a kind of niche. And that means that we give a lot of attention to the areas that we cover. We have a small staff, but we as I said, work very hard, give attention to the areas we cover, and develop that expertise. So at any point in time, if we get a call from whether it's a government department or television station to say we want you to comment on this or that issue, we are able to do so because we are intimately connected to our subject matter. And of course, apart from the countries that we deal with, we also have a few thematic areas we deal with. So, for example, one of our thematic areas, subject of a book that we published at the end of last year, is political Islam. Another is terrorism. We deal with that. We've prepared courses on terrorism, counterterrorism, etc. So I mean, certainly without an organization like AMEC and others that work in this field, the South African public, but also South African policymakers, will be much the poorer for it. And have less of an understanding of these kinds of issues.
And with that in mind, I think, thank goodness then for your organization's existence, because yes, it certainly does make that impact. But more about Naeem Jeenah, because I want to really know about, like, so where did it all start for you? Like, what fires your imagination? Why are you where you are right now? We'll get those answers in a moment.
Looking to get your kick? Kiki's have now reopened on 235 Matthews Maiwa Road in Durban. Head on over for the taste with Kick. We offer something scrumptious for everyone in the family. Wraps, chicken tikka, burgers, tender grills, mocktails, milkshakes, and so much more. Corporate and events catering available. Visit our social media pages for more info or call 031 209 0119. Kiki's, the taste with Kick.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness. And every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
My Lord, show me right from wrong.
Huda SA is an organization that focuses primarily on assisting communities within the eThekwini region by collaborating with existing Islamic centers, mosques and madrasas. Your contribution goes towards the uplifting of orphans and vulnerable children, including vulnerable families, by assisting with education, welfare, nutrition and maintenance of madrasas, mosques and Islamic community centers. Make the difference. Donate to our noble causes. More information is available at huda-int.org or WhatsApp or call us on 031 271 3049.
My Lord, show me right from wrong. Give me light, make me strong. I know the road is long.
It's been a household name for years. It's been an important ingredient in South African kitchens, and it's been an affordable, healthy choice for your family. Helios, first our pure sunflower cooking oil, and now introducing Helios margarines and spreads, following the same traditions and tastes you've grown to love and trust from Helios. Fortified with vitamins A, D, and E, also rich in omega-3 and 6 essential fatty acids for a healthy eating lifestyle. Helios margarine and spreads, available now at all leading South African supermarkets. Helios margarine, the tradition lives on.
This Ramadan, can we still feel the heartbreak, the grief, the pain? Islamic Relief needs you to keep feeling, because the believers are like one body. When any part aches, the whole body aches. Feel their pain. For just 450 Rand, you can ease their pain this Ramadan. Donate now to Islamic Relief. Visit www.islamic-relief.org.za.
The Ashraf Garda Show, 8 to 10 a.m. on Salam Media.
So Naeem Jeenah with me. He's the executive director. He's the head of the Afro Middle East Centre, and we're talking extensively about the work they do. But I'm very curious about where it all started for Naeem. So Naeem, yeah, I mean, how did you get to be on this journey? I mean, maybe like first things first, when you were a lightie, like what is your dream?
What was my dream? This is a very long time ago, so I don't remember what my dreams
you got to
were.
think about it. Yeah.
But how I got started on the journey that has led to where I am, I would say. Look, I joined the Muslim Youth Movement when I was 14 years old. The Muslim Youth Movement, a kind of Muslim revivalist organization, was at that time just getting involved politically in the anti-apartheid struggle. And that shaped my understanding of Islam, of South Africa, of politics, of Muslims, and of the world. And I think that to a large extent, my understanding of things today and my involvement in the things that I am involved in is because of what I learned, what I was taught, and what I was guided to in those what we might call teenage years. I never saw myself as.
And is there anything that sticks out? And I don't mean like a long 10-minute answer, but there could be just sometimes it's just one sentence, one line that someone taught you as this young guy at MYM, and that just stood out for you. Can you remember?
Well, I can't say one line, but let me say this, that I grew up in the MYM at the age of 14, understanding that people were equal. I had seniors in the organization who were in their late 40s. Dr. Shaukat Token at the time was the president of the organization. I never referred to him as uncle. He never expected that. We were equals. Men and women in the organization were equals. And I think that this was the most important lesson I learned.
Yeah, and that played out. I mean, I probably heard you in the build up to that 1994 election when we were deciding like who to vote for, and I mean, I'm looking at probably at the GIST Center. That's when I can recollect, right? You saying a few things there, but then of course it moved on into the establishment of the Voice with your wife, the late Shamima, and I mean that point about not just giving Muslims a space in broader society, but also giving women spaces, and that hasn't stopped, right?
Sure. Of course, it goes back before 94, right? So my most activist period was in the 1980s, I would say. But yeah, I mean, the issue of the role of women in our society, particularly in Muslim society, but more generally in South African society, has a very bad reputation for the way that women are treated despite our great constitution. For me, that is a challenge that continues. It's a task that continues. Certainly my late wife, as you pointed out, was quite an activist and very vocal on those issues.
It's interesting. I mean, just to recollect, some of the actions about finding spaces in the mosque was considered completely radical in terms of how it was described. But today, it's still not perfect, but it's far more mainstream than you can imagine. So that point about somebody has to make the start, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, things that at one point are regarded as radical then become mainstream. And so, in what formerly used to be the Transvaal or formerly Natal, you could count on one hand in the 80s the number of masajid that had any kind of facilities for women. Today, virtually every town has some kind of facilities, not ideal. Mostly not equal, but at least some facility, and it's developing. So yes, I mean we have a long way to go, but we've also come a long way.
Yeah. So moving on from the MYM, then I mean, as this youngster, what then did you study? I mean, how did you then choose to follow a certain career path? Because I would think MYM is the activism part. How did that inspire your choices thereafter?
I did 2 years at medical school, Ashraf, and then I went to Natal Medical School, which was my best political education that I received. And then I did 1 year at the University of Durban Westville doing mathematics and physics, etc. But decided that I wanted to get married because I didn't think that that the woman I wanted to marry, who was 5 years older than I was at the time, I was 21, that she would wait for me forever. So I quit. I did a course in computer programming, became a computer programmer, got married. And then the Muslim Youth Movement asked me to work as national director for 2 years. And that was the end of my kind of corporate life, which lasted a year and a half. And since then, I worked for the MYM, I worked for Al Qalam as editor, I worked for The Voice, I worked for Kusatu, and in the civil society NGO sector, Freedom of Expression Institute, etc.
Yeah, amazing journey. I mean, is there something that for you is like got in the way besides maybe the medical degree did get away, but like on reflection now, like something that you've missed out on?
No, Ashraf, I have no regrets. Even my 2 years that I spent at medical school, as I say, I don't think I would have got that political experience at any other university, frankly. Medical school was extremely politicized at that time. And so, no, I think that my life journey has gone in a pretty good direction in general.
And are there people, you mentioned Shaukat Token, I mean the late Shaukat Token, right? But are there people who've touched? Of course there are, but I mean, is there one or two people who've stood out for you, who've touched your life, even outside the MYM? That I mean, it's a chance to just tell us more about how they've impacted on you.
Well, there have been many, of course. I've lived many decades, so there have been many. Let me just point to two people, Ashraf. It's easier to point to people who are dead than those who are alive. One of whom was, of course, my wife Shamima. I married her when I was 22 years old. We lived together for 10 years, married, and we learned a lot from each other. I certainly learned a lot from her about being a human being, about being a giving person, about being honest and generous and having good character. And a second person I want to point to is someone who was a very close friend of both of us, Harun Patel. Harun had a long journey of his own. He was Hafidhul Quran. Then he became deputy president of AZAPO in the 80s, left AZAPO, Workers' Organization for Socialist Action, and then he joined the MYM and was working for the MYM at the time when he died in 1995. The understanding of selflessness, of complete sacrifice and struggle that I learned from him, I think, these are lessons that shape one's life.
Yeah, and therefore, I mean, people listening to you and I talking now, and the truth is, people even in Ramadan and outside, they grappling with direction, they grappling with purpose. I mean, they do fundamentals, but they grappling with finding themselves. What's your advice to them?
Well, I think knowing yourself is, of course, critically important. Prophet ﷺ said, "He who knows himself knows Allah." So knowing yourself is important. But I think that grappling with your life is good, but you also need to allow your life to be guided. You need to accept that Allah is the guide, that He will take you along the path that is best for you if you open yourself up to His intervention, and go with it. It's really not useful, I believe, in my life, to fight against the way that things are in my life and the direction. Look, I spoke about medical school, science degree, left all that, etc. So in terms of my career, I ended up as an academic in politics when I started off at medical school. But that's because you embrace the direction that your life takes you in.
So I understand the need to sort of submit to Allah's decree and for Him to intervene, but in practical terms, how does one do that? So you make the du'as in the mosque or at home, but in practically, how do you have a plan and then submit to Allah's plan? Can you share some examples?
Yeah, this is a difficult one if you think of life as something that you plan and then execute that plan in precision, as opposed to opening yourself up to where it takes you. I think that it's critically important that you have full trust that Allah is your guide, that Allah is in charge of your life, that even if you have to struggle to make your way in life, that He's the one that's in charge, and then the plans unfold to you.
Yeah. So therefore, you could be in medical school and your purpose is not to become a doctor. It's not that obvious, right? What then? What then has been your purpose? If you could define like your life purpose.
Quite simply, my life purpose is to struggle and strive with the objective of seeing justice being established for all people all over the world. Now, note, I say to my purpose is to struggle and strive for justice, not to establish justice, because I don't believe that that's within our power or purview to do so. Allah establishes goodness, Allah establishes justice. Our role is to struggle in that path, and that's all the purpose I have in my life.
And the distinction between establishing justice and striving for justice in practical terms, how then do you do that?
Well, in practical terms, saying that I want to establish justice is very arrogant, because it means that I have the power to do so. I don't. My only purpose is to struggle, and then Allah delivers. Sometimes the delivery might not be what you have struggled for, but that's not a failure on the part of the struggler.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about the MYM from the outset, and I mean, you're quite right. I mean, I certainly remember as a laity being fascinated by their take on not just on social justice, but on the political Islam that you talk about, that political dimension. It certainly has never left me and probably inspired me in ways that I haven't admitted before. But when I then think about Muslim spaces in South Africa now, right? So you had a certain vision and a view when you in the 80s, and you have a vision and a view of Muslims in South Africa now. What is that?
Well, let me say one thing, that I think that many of the things that the MYM strove for in the 70s and 80s, and for which it was hugely vilified, now have become the norm in Muslim society. You spoke about women in the mosques, but generally the position of women in society. Look at Muslim media, for example, and the role that women play there. The MYM was vilified in the 70s and 80s for promoting the idea that if you didn't understand Arabic, you should read the Quran in translated form. Today you can go to an ijtima and you will find that. The MYM was, I remember in the early 80s, being afraid as MYM and MSA, I was president of the MSA as well, activists being afraid to stand up in a mosque and speak about Palestine, because physically afraid, because we might get beaten up, because politics was not part of Islam, we were told. Today, that's any Muslim that doesn't speak about Palestine is looked upon very suspiciously. So many of the things that the Muslim youth movement strove for has now become kind of mainstream in society. And I think that for the organization, I'm not part of the organization anymore, but for the organization, I think that this is something that it should be able to look back on 35 years or 40 years later.
Absolutely, yeah. And perhaps to leave you with this, and you've got like 30 seconds or so to answer that. So not just Muslims in South Africa, but South Africans in South Africa. Where are we at, and where should we be going?
We are in a very bad place and in a very desperate place. We had great hopes and great dreams, and we've met serious obstacles in the way. I think that the obstacles can be removed, whether we talk about corruption, the poverty, etc. And I think that we have a bright future ahead of us, but yeah, we are at a road bump on our path.
Okay, road pump, bright futures. I'll hold on to that, considering we're looking for the moon, the crescent moon coming up sometime soon, inshallah, for Eid. Naeem, great chatting to you. I wish we could speak for another hour, but we can't. But a nice snapshot into your life, most appreciated. I'm going to suggest people Google you. In fact, I never even asked you about your Hajj. Perhaps quick one line on the Hajj that you had with your wife, because I need them to buy your book, okay? So what's the name of the book, but perhaps a one-line lesson of the Hajj?
Book is Journey of Discovery, a South African Hajj. The Hajj and my wife's illness before she died were two of the most important events in my life that have shaped the way I think, I believe, and I act.
Okay, feel free to tag us on that Hajj book as well. Certainly on Twitter, I'm going to gladly share that as well. There we are. Naeem Jeenah, Afro Middle East Centre, is the executive director there, and he's featured in Champion People. We'll do it again tomorrow with another special guest. Look out for that. But we start at 8 o'clock, as you know. Assalamu alaikum.